I'd like to welcome everybody to the third session in our EDI Professional Services series. This particular one is on printing and troubleshooting vendor EDI850s for outbound purchase orders. So topics will be covered in this webinar is understanding the setup required to print vendor EDI850 outbound POs, learning setup required in CSD to generate vendor EDI850 outbound POs, and then learning how to troubleshoot vendor EDI850 outbound POs error using the ION Inbox Outbox Admin Function. A little bit about NSA. So we were founded in 1984. NSA is the longest term reseller for the Infor distribution ERP solution. It's been called many things over the years, but yeah, we were the first, and we've got the largest team of consultants of anyone in the industry with the most experience, average of 22 plus years for all the folks that are our consultants. And we provide specifically ERP solutions for distributors. That is our focus in the Infor space. And NSA plus our services that enhance utilization of your ERP solution. We have over 20 NSA plus solutions that are add-ons to your current ERP, whether it be SXC or Cloud Suite. I'm Brian Weaver. I'm the Vice President of Sales here at NSA. And there's my contact information on the screen. And then presenting today has been with NSA for a long period of time. He's a senior business consultant. He's got significant expertise in EDI. He's done many breakout sessions at TUG, as well as worked with numerous clients of NSA in this area. So with Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brian. So today we're going to go over printing of vendor EDI outbound purchase orders, the setups associated with it and the printing, and how to troubleshoot a little bit using the ION Inbox Outbox in the admins. The agenda for today is we're going to go over the setups required. We're going to go over the printing of the vendor EDI850 outbound purchase orders. I apologize for repeating that over and over, but it's how it came out. We're going to also go over some of the troubleshooting. So everybody's used to acronyms and we all love them so dearly. Our customers truly love them. So I'm going to try to just use 3 of them in this session if I can. The first one's EDI. And EDI refers to electronic data interchange, and that's the movement of transactional data between business partners. This one's a lovely one, SAABIOI, which I have trouble remembering. It's the ION Inbox Outbox function, and that's where you would determine whether the purchase order actually got printed properly to the ION system and transmitted to your partners. And then ION is the third one, and that stands for Intelligent Open Network. So it's going to take transactions from our network. It's going to process them through the system using ION, and it's going to send those eventually to your vendor partner. So let's get into the setups. I'm going to go over setups for, there's an administrative option, an ION noun. There's vendor product cross-references, purchase order add-ons, units of measure, payment terms. There's settings in the vendor record under the e-commerce section. Then we're going to go over the printing of purchase orders and the setups required for those, the ION Inbox Outbox, operator security, and then I'll touch on the ION connection points and data flows. I'm not going to get into those in great detail as there are separate sessions and training involved in those. And then I'm going to just touch purchase order events. I don't have a lot on that in this case. So let's talk about the administrative option that's required to be set up for outbound EDI850 purchase orders. Under administrative options, under documents, and purchase orders and printing, you'll need to set the EDI format to a 5. That allows the system to send the transaction to ION when it's appropriate. There's also a noun required to be set up in the software. So you'll go into the ION noun setup and you'll select new. You'll look at the, do a lookup and find purchase order and select it. Then you'll check to publish the outbound sync baud there, and you'll select save. That will bring up this window. You'll verify that you've selected it properly, and you'll do save again. That'll set up the noun, which allows the system to send outbound transactions. Now, for EDI, all outbound transactions and some other transactions in the software require nouns to be set up. The next setups involve the vendor product cross-references. Now, notice that we know what our product is, but the vendor's got their own product number. And in order to communicate effectively with them, you're going to want to set up their part numbers in the software. So under the vendor product warehouse setup, product warehouse setup, you're going to, on the general tab, you'll say you're going to do this for each warehouse. Notice where it says warehouse 40. You're going to set up the vendor number that you get the product from primarily, and what do they call it? And in this case, I've got drill bits. 1334 is the DeWalt product number. Additionally, you can set up UPC numbers, which might be used by vendors as well. Now in the software, I've identified the first 6 characters as the vendor and the the last 5 as the product. That's pretty common in our software, and some vendors use this and can provide those, and they can be set up as well. So you'll go into the UPC number setup, and in there you'll specify the vendor, the product, and here the vendor number and product is entered, and you'll notice 6 and 5. So it adds the leading zeros, 001001, and it adds the leading 0 there for the part number. Again, the EDI document may or may not be transmitting those, so it's good to have them set up so that you can use them if they're there. So let's talk about what's called X12 standards. In 1979, the American National Standards Institute chartered the Accredited Standards Committee to develop uniform standards, X12. Now, that's not an acronym, it's actually called X12, for inter-industry electronic exchange of business transactions. Now, we use those for 3 types of items within our software. There are others, such as ship via, and maybe a couple of others as well. But the 3 that are used primarily by our partners, by our customers, and by their partners, vendors, are the units of measure, purchase order add-ons, and terms. Let's talk about units of measure first. It's the most complicated area. So in setting up units of measures, there's 2 places to do that. One is in the generic setup of table values under unit conversions. And in there, an example of that might be DZ for dozen. Now, everybody knows that a dozen is 12, and so that's very common throughout all industries and can be used in a generic table setup. Notice I've only used 2 letters there, as 2 letters are the maximum that can be used by the X12 standards. Or these can be set up specific to the item itself, to each product. So for example, every item might have a different box size. In this case, I might have a box of 1,000 for a specific item. And so in the item specific extended unit conversion setup, I will put BX and I'll put the conversion factor of 1,000 for that. I'll show you that in a second. So let's look at the generic setup of inventory unit of measures. You're going to go into table code value setups in the software. You're going to select unit conversions from the dropdown. And then X12 standards, as I mentioned, require a 2-letter EDI unit of measure code. Now notice in our product master, we may have set up the stocking unit of measure as 4 letters, each, dozen, C100 for 100, or 1,000 for 1,000. They could be any 4 letters that you want to use, alphanumeric. However, there's an EDI 2-letter code that you can use, that you must use. And in this case, in the generic table, you would set up EA for the 1-to-1, DZ for a dozen, 12 to 1, 100, 100 to 1, 1,000 would be 1,000 to 1. Now, some people might use TH. You can use whatever you like there. Those are not required by the X12 standards. It is only required that it's 2 letters. But here's an example of it being set up for in the generic tables. Now notice that I have set up in those generic tables EA and EACH. That usually, if a customer uses both of those as a stocking unit of measure, then you cannot set these up in the generic system because they both would have the same two-letter code of EA. Now that would work on an outbound transaction like a purchase order. So if my stocking unit is each, it's sending EA. And if it's EA, it's sending EA. However, on the inbound transaction coming back, an acknowledgement or an invoice, for example, if they send in EA, the system's going to find the first one in the table and it'll look for a stocking unit of EA. If you set that up as EACH, that's not a hit and it won't find the transaction. This is probably the most difficult area to discuss with customers to have them understand what's going on. So I encourage almost every single unit of measure be set up in the product specific area and not in the generic area. But let's look at some of the generic ones anyway. When you set it up, you're going to do a multiple of 1 and you're going to use a two-letter EDI code. Here's some examples of those that might be set up there. Actually, examples of, product-specific EDI unit of measure setting and other things that you will use that for. This product is DW1334. I could buy it in a box of 10. My unit of measure might be BX10. However, I've got to set it up as BX in the extended unit conversion. So I've got 10 of those. I might buy a case of 100. I might buy it each. And I might buy a pallet of 4,500 of them, or any multiple other types of configurations. Here's how those specific ones would be set up. So I'd enter the product. I would describe it. This might be however you want to do it right here as case. It might be CASE. The stocking unit of measure will default as EA. My two-letter unit of measure would be CS. And that would be agreed upon with the vendor. They will always use CS. That'll be 100 stocking units of measure, which the system will automatically compute the conversion factor. And I'll put a description in. That's a simple setup for buying 100 or a case of drill bits. The next setting that's required for specific units of measure is for special price costing. If you do any special price costing, then you would be required for EDI to set up a unit of measure, not a pricing unit, but a unit of measure. So for example, I've got a product set up here. It's a foil. It is special price costed, and this is on the pricing screen in the product setup. And I'm going to say that I'm going to buy that per 1,000 square feet. And the price of that is, and the vendor will give us this information, 0.08533,000. And that's how they want to see it when you buy it. Price per 1,000 square foot at that rate. Now you also have to set up, notice this is the pricing conversion. You have to set up for EDI to work for this, an inventory pricing unit of measure. And you're going to do it exactly the same way as it was done in the product setup on the pricing screen. You're going to come in and create the item, put in your unit. You're going to change this to fraction. It defaults as multiple. And then you're going to put in that conversion factor right there. And it will compute this units of measure in a stocking unit. Now, the reason that I do it that way is it's much easier than taking this number, dividing it into 100 to come up with that number. Every time you set up a product, much simpler in product setup to just go ahead and set it up as a fraction instead of a multiple and put in the same factor. You're going to put a two-letter extension for EDI, generally the first two letters of the unit of measure you're using, and you're going to be per 1,000 square feet here. That will make it work properly. In the old graphical or GUI SX Enterprise format, when you ran the import function, if the unit of measure was not correct, you would have two errors, one for the regular unit of measure and one for the pricing unit of measure. Now that goes away in CSD, and I'll show you where you'll be able to see those in the other sessions on inbound documents where that comes into play. Any questions on the setup of products, of units of measure? Oh, I'm that good. That's wonderful. Thanks, folks. Okay. So now let's talk about other setups in the software. Purchase order add-ons. Now this is how they're going to ship things to you, or these might be extra freight or assembly charges associated with the order that are set up in the add-on section of a purchase order. X12 standards are applicable to these. There's a list of over 1,000 accepted four-letter codes for purchase order add-ons. So in this example, I've come into the generic table setups for table code values, selected purchase order add-ons, and the ones I'm showing here are add-on number 1 is freight, add-on number 10 is an advertising allowance. Now that's a credit that's going to be sent through the freight system. And this is a handling charge. Let's look at the EDI setup of those. So once I've set it up, so in this case, I've got add-on number 4 shown here, an expedite fee. And if I look in the table of X12 standards, I'll see that Charlie 870, C870 is the four-letter code associated with that. Now, almost every single vendor I have dealt with for our customers uses this methodology for EDI. Again, there's about 1,200 of them. Usually I'll see 8 to 10 of them being used by our customers. Payment terms is the last one that we use that's X12 standard. In this case, I'm going again to the table code value setups. I'm doing terms. Now notice on the split pay section, there's another section for EDI terms codes. Now these are X12 standards as well, and here's an example of 3 of them. 02 means end of the month. 24, they describe that as anticipation. Those are discounts for early payment, right? So that's a terms code that has a discount on it. And then I might have a contract price. So those are the X12 standard terms codes. Well, that's usually going to be at the top of the purchase order as your terms. We do provide some things at the line level. I'd have to work on it a bit to see how the line level works with these. If you have any questions on that, feel free to send me an email and I'll be glad to answer or research those. Other setups involved in the software. So under the vendor setup, under the e-commerce tab in the document send types, you've got to set the purchase order EDI850 to ION. That way it will actually send the transaction through the ION system out to the value add partner who will then send it on to your vendor. Also in the e-commerce page, under e-commerce settings, under that section of the page, you've got to enter the trading partner. Trading partners generally are a value that is agreed upon between you and your vendor so that you can recognize each other at the top of each transaction. If that's not agreed upon by both parties, it will not be processed. In this case, I've used something simple like NSA and DEWALT. It can also be the vendor number, and in the Cloud Suite distribution software, we can actually just use the vendor number, but the standard setup would include the trading partner as well. Notice that there are 3 user fields here. Now those can be used to send additional data to that specific vendor that they require on all your purchase orders. So those are quite useful to use. For example, the word true might go. Now notice I put here the value is actually the database value of that field. It's actually called vendor setup EDI partner address. This one's your address. So they have 3 very strange database names, but on the screens that your customers will see, this is what they're called. And they will appear in all outbound documents that relate to purchase orders. That's it for vendor setups. Operator security. In operator security, the one that they're not going to have now that you're going to implement for EDI specific is so that they can get to the inbox outbox administration function, SAABIOI. Generally, I'll give them a 4 so that they can change things if they have to, but they're generally not going to. I don't really want them deleting those transactions, your operators, so I'll generally give them a level 4. It can be as low as a 2 because really all they're going to do in there is an inquiry. Okay, so let's talk about the purchase order print functions. There are 4 methods that are generally used to print purchase orders in the software. I enter a purchase order and I print it. I enter an order in sales order entry. I create a tied purchase order, a regular purchase order that might come into our warehouse, or a drop ship or direct purchase order. Those could be printed from sales order entry. Or I can do a list of purchase orders using the purchase order print function. If I'm working a bit and then I want to make sure I sent them all, I can go ahead and use a list in that methodology. And the final method is through the purchase order merge function that's in the buyer's control center. Let's look at those. So purchase order entry, you're going to enter a purchase order, then you're going to print it. So to do that, from the entry function, you're going to select print. This box will pop up with your purchase order number defaulted. You're going to select the use where appropriate box. You're going to select print purchase orders, and then you'll select submit. As long as you stay on the purchase order entry screen, these values remain checked. Once you leave, when you come back, you'll have to check them again. They're checked, you select submit, and that will send the purchase order out to the ION system and forward it through to the vendor. The second place you can do this is in sales order entry. So I may have created a tied purchase order, either a drop ship or a PO. I go to print sales order. I select my print function. Pops up my sales order print function. At the lower right corner, I can select PO print. That will pop up my purchase order print function that looks identical to what it is in purchase order entry. Again, you're going to select where appropriate. You're going to check the print purchase order box and you'll click submit. That will again send that transaction through the software to be printed to ION. The third method that would be used is I may be working throughout the day and I've created several purchase orders for a vendor manually. In that case, I may want to do them as a list in the purchase order entry print function. So in that function, you're going to purchase order entry processing print POs. On the information screen, you're going to set the print type to ION. On the options screen, you're going to change the list of purchase orders to yes and click list. When the list pops up, your purchase order may appear, or you can select it in the drop-down list. Usually there'll be 5 or 8 of them that you've done previously, and that'll appear, and you can select it from that list. You might enter them yourself as well. Then in option number 9, you'll say print to EDI where appropriate, EDI ION where appropriate, set that to yes. And when you finally run it, it will generate that outbound PO. The last method that's used is in the purchase order demand center using the merge function. So I'm a buyer. I'm working in my purchase order demand center. I'm working on DeWalt, and I've selected 5 warehouses, 5 product lines. This was blank because it's a tie that I'm going to print. I'm going to create them and print them. So I select the merge box right here. Once I've done that, I select merge. That will pop up this screen right here. On the left side is the demand center merge. You select to merge the RARs, the replenishment reports. Select print purchase orders. Check the print our purchase order product on the POs. Now, the reason that I do that is because it will always print the vendor's product. But I want to send my product just in case. So if the vendor has it, they might be able to send it back. So I always do that. That's a preference. as to printing our product on POs. And then at the bottom, print to EDI where appropriate. Once you select submit at the bottom, it will generate the purchase orders and it will send you a report. I'll show you some setups on that, which says what purchase order number got printed. Now these defaults, these come in, you can set these defaults like this. And the way that you do that is you would set up a purchase order merge report for each buyer that starts with @RM. That's replenishment merge. So @RM and then the buyer's initials are DE in this case. On the options page, you set the buyer in option 1, print purchase orders option 3, print our product option 4. In the printer options for the exception report, you'll specify where you want to get the report that tells you the purchase order numbers generated, or if they failed to print at all. And then lastly, you're going to want to set print to EDI where appropriate to yes. That is how they'll default properly here for that specific buyer. Saving time is always a good thing when you're running the software. Getting a day's work done in a day. Any questions on the printing processes? Boy, I'm good. I love it. So now let's talk about troubleshooting a little bit. Once that purchase order is printed, how do I verify that it actually went out and it went to ION and got processed there? Well, I'm going to walk through that process and go through a little bit of the setups here as well. When you go to the ION inbox outbox, excuse me, you're going to select these. I'm going to skip this slide. I apologize, folks. Let's talk about the setups first. ION connection points and data flows. This is a separate classes relate to ION and setting up of these connection points and data flows. I'm going to just touch base on them a little bit so we have an understanding of what's happening outside the Cloud Suite distribution software. This is an example of a connection point being set up. So this is I'm going to be sending transactions through my partner. In this case, that's Unilink. It could be any other value add network partner. I'm going to put my system's name here. That's going to be my username that I log in to their system and what the password is to be set up. This information will be provided by that value add network partner. Now I've also got to set up some documents in there. In this case, I'm doing documents and I'm setting up a purchase order. Now I'll leave that pretty simple as it is. I could do some other things here and I'll show you in the data flow. This is a data flow. And in this case, I'm going from Cloud Suite distribution. I've got my document purchase order coming through here. That indicates it's a purchase order. And here you can see I've selected it down below. This is a decision point. It's going to check to see if there are decisions associated with whether it should send this purchase order onto your value add partner or not. In this case, I want to make sure that in the document, the field that's called EDI850 equals yes. So when you say EDI where appropriate, that's what it does. In the outbound document, it sets it to yes. So let's talk about the inbox outbox and how you can see what's happening over what got sent to ION. So when I go into the inbox outbox, it's going to look, screen looks like this. And my parameters screen, I apologize, right there, will pop up. I'm going to move that in later on to the other place. I'm going to set outbound as my direction. I'm going to put my status equal to processed or all. Put my ION noun as purchase order. You'll have to do a lookup and select it to make it stick. You can't just type it. Leave your bot ID blank, your ID blank, and change the number of days from 7 to 0. When you Do the search button. This is the screen that will appear. Now you'll notice that the PO number is sitting in the bot ID. It's got the company number and the PO number there. So I can see that in fact it processed my purchase order. Note that it's created 2 transactions here, not just one. That's just a function of the software. It loves to create business object documents, BODs, for this purpose. And it'll create many of them when you're doing purchase orders, when you enter it, when you finish it, when you print it. So the first one here will say no to EDI, and the second one will say yes. So if I drill down into that and I look at the reference field, oh, that's on the wrong spot, isn't it? I apologize. EDI850 out equals yes will tell you that it actually went. Let me get into the software briefly and show you that. So here I've selected to find my document. Here it is. I do a drill down on it. And I could see if I scroll down just a little bit that that one was sent to EDI with a yes. If I look at the other one up above it, it'll say no. So if a vendor calls you up and says that they didn't get your purchase order, you can come in here and verify that in fact you printed it and that said yes. If you don't find it that way, it did not go to that vendor. If it still didn't make it to the vendor and it says yes, you're going on to IT to ask them to do research to see why that transaction didn't go. And then you would go back and reprint it and make sure that you said yes to EDI where appropriate. So what have we done? We've talked about setups required for processing vendor EDI invoices, purchase orders. How do we manage the errors and exceptions? Boy, that one's off. I apologize, folks. Using the Outbox and how to print those purchase orders. I'll go ahead and fix these on the slide that goes on the web. Any questions at all? I put everybody to sleep.
No, Dave, I don't think so. This was awesome. Great job doing all the setup for this and so forth, and showing the proof of the transactions. I'll give people just one more minute if there are any questions anybody has.
I appreciate you adding troubleshooting steps to this so that it enables people to do that without having to reach out for help.
Mm-hmm. That was tough to do too, getting into the ION stuff and making it usable for those operators. So I'm glad it's useful. So our next steps for our customers: document what vendors they're sending purchase orders to using EDI. Talk to your buyers to figure out if they've got issues now. Research any solutions that you need to do in CSD, and then of course reach out to your friendly consultant to plan and implement processes to improve handling of vendor EDI purchase orders. This is a professional series that's ongoing. This is the 3rd one. This is the schedule for the rest of them. Please note that those are subject to change, and these are available in our webinar series on our website. That's it, folks. Thank you so much.
Dave, thank you for taking the time to put this together, and thank you everybody that attended the session live today. We will be getting out the recorded session sometime within about the next 24 hours. It'll go to you guys as well as the team members that were not able to attend. So thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Great job, Dave.
Thank you. Have a great day, folks.